some of the things I wanted to bring up is that we have a very heavily trained city staff, and a lot of people don't realize that our city employees are what are called disaster service workers. We're required as government employees in the state of California to respond in an emergency. So we have a duty and an obligation to stay at work and to respond. And I know that a good chunk, if not all, of our city employees take that very seriously. I kind of equate it sometimes to schools. You know, you want to make sure that teacher's going to stay with your kids. And so when I try to tell the employees that we have this responsibility of the city, it's the same way as they hope that teacher is taking responsibility for their children in school. And I think that kind of drives it home when we talk about what our role is. As I said, I've been with the city for 13 years. I oversee the Emergency Management and Homeland Security Office. I fall under the fire department. Our main responsibility is to prepare the city to respond and recover from an emergency, and we do that in multiple ways. Everybody in the city has a job that's in an emergency, so they kind of direct what we have up here in our panel. My job is to run the Emergency Operations Center. The fire department would be doing rescue. Law will be doing alert and warning, and they'll talk about that. Community service has a role, and so on. And I also brought a representative from the County Emergency Management Division up here to also answer a few questions. I also oversee many of the volunteer programs like certain races in the city. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to the chief to talk a little bit about what the fire department's role in this disaster, and we'll make our way down.
Thank you, Brevin. Well, good evening. My name is David Segura, your fire chief, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our capabilities, our responsibilities and, during the disaster, and also our day-to-day operations. But I do want to let you know, I'm also a resident of this community, and I've been here as a fire chief now over a year, in the fire service for over 34 years. And I've said it before, some of you may have heard me say this before, but one of the reasons I came to this, to work for this fire department and to work for this great community is because we do have an outstanding fire department. I've always known that through my career, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to be to lead this organization. And we also have provide excellent training and resources for our department. I'll go over a few of those resources. But we have an excellent working relationship, and we have also an outstanding police department, but I'll let him tell you about that, and our marine safety as well. So we have a great team. We all work well together. We are, as residents here, and I include myself in that, we are blessed that we have the staff that we do that are committed to providing public safety and keeping our community safe. You've heard it many times in the past. During a disaster, we are going to be overwhelmed, though. And we're going to be tied up for the first 24 to 72 hours. And it is important that you are prepared. You have yourself, your home, your business, and your family prepared for a disaster. And hopefully you can have enough resources and supplies that will get you through at least 3 days, and then we'll have help coming. From the fire department here, your local department, we have a total of 8 fire stations. We have 41 firefighter staff daily. That, again, that number works out very well for our day-to-day operations. That number of personnel and the resources that we have, we are able to answer over 20,000 calls for service a year. And we have our marine safety as well, our lifeguards within the fire department, and they're busy every year, but we have the staff that accommodate the day-to-day operations. But when it comes to a disaster, we're going to change our operations and our response models. We have the ability and you saw the crew you saw here earlier, they are out of Fire Station 6, Edward Station, and they typically roll out of a fire engine, and as for our day-to-day operations, fighting fire and providing EMS, paramedic services. They are also cross-trained as hazmat specialists. And we have a hazmat team that they utilize, and they'll roll out for any hazardous materials calls. And so we cross-train them. We cannot afford to staff a hazmat unit full-time, nor do we need to, because we don't have that many calls every day. However, when that disaster hits, we're going to pull them into the hazmat unit. We also have the same thing with our 2 stations at Lake Station and over at the Murdy Station, cross-trained as our technical rescue experts. and they respond on a ladder truck for our day-to-day operations, but during a disaster, we will pull them in as technical rescue experts, and they'll have to come over and work in that arena and under that operations. But in an incident, a large-scale incident, a disaster, we're not going to be taking on 911 calls. We are not going to be responding to every call. The priority is going to be for our staff to go out, and they have a pre-designated route that they're going to perform. They're going to be out there to look at where the significant damage is. Triage. We hear about triage when we triage patients, but they're also going to be triaging the community, the infrastructure. And they're going to be looking at where the need is going to be the most need for the most resources. Where I believe Dr. Lucy Jones mentioned the fires. Anything that's significant that could potentially cause a conflagration, we're going to focus on that. We are very fortunate, though, that we do have in this state a world-class state mutual aid system. So help will come, but like I said, it may take a few days. We practice this, or we use, not, I should say practice it, we actually utilize that mutual aid system every year with our wildland fires. So California, we are experts at that, we become experts at that, where we all support each other in this state for large-scale events. But again, it may take a few days for the help to get here, especially when it's a disaster that's widespread and it's hit a large part of the region. So again, let me see if I covered everything I wanted to touch on today, but that's pretty much the way we're going to operate out there. I just want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that we are not going to be responding to 911 calls. We're going to change our operations completely to triage and begin to focus the resources to the area that's needed the most, and then eventually more help will come, and then we'll start to answer the individual 911 calls after that. So with that, we will be available to answer questions. Again, it's my pleasure to be here as your fire chief, and thank you for attending tonight. I'm going to turn it over. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to our police captain, Brian Seitz.
Thank you, Chief. As Chief Segura said, my name is Brian Seitz, and I'm a police captain here in Huntington Beach. And a little bit about myself as well. I am homegrown. For those of you that have long memories, I went to Kettler, I went to Geisler, I went to Edison. I met my wife at Edison. Her parents live in the same house she grew up in, and my parents still live in the same house that I grew up in. So we take this more seriously than most. I'll also tell you that this is the second police department I've worked for. I've been a police officer for a little over 30 years, and it's the best. And not only is the police department the best, but the fire department's the best, marine safety is amazing. And honestly, I'm so impressed that you guys all came, but what I'm really impressed by is how seriously my city takes things like this to host an event like this. I don't know if you understand, but other cities generally don't get this sort of service and this sort of preventive maintenance, if you will. So I'm very thankful that I work in such a progressive and even aggressive city when it comes to disaster management. So for the last 4 years, one of my assignments has been to work with Brevin Mettler here in the EOC. And I got to tell you, I went into that assignment kicking and screaming a little bit, but I have learned so much from Brevin, I have learned so much from the fire department, I've learned so much from my marine safety brothers and sisters. And one of the things that I've learned is how well we work together when the chips are down. So echoing what Chief Segura said, we're coming. I can't tell you the time that we'll be there, but we're coming. And we, Brevin and I about 6 months to a year ago taught the entire police department disaster management. When I say taught, it's refreshers. Our officers get these refreshers on an annual or biannual basis. And so we don't have 41 people on staff at all times. That's a phenomenal number. Sometimes we have a lot more and sometimes we have a lot less. And so Chief Segura touched on a plan that they have. And the police department worked in conjunction with the fire department, and those plans are different but complementary. So for instance, if the earthquake hits at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to send my officers to the elementary school because I'm pretty sure nobody's going to be there. And the one thing I've learned in law enforcement is I never tell my officers how to get from A to Z. I just tell them I want them to get to Z and let them figure it out. And so we do have a plan. We've practiced it. We've enacted it. We've practiced it in conjunction with the entire city. We are well prepared, and I mentioned, or I heard Dr. Lucy Jones mention something she called a tsunami walkout, and I want you to know we did that 3 years ago. So, and I would love to take credit, but candidly, that was Brevin, and I just did what he told me. But so it's interesting. We triage as well. That's part of the complementary packet that we have. And so our triage, we look at things differently, and we look at data and statistics, and so earthquake is certainly at the top of the list. And as the doctor said, tsunami's there as well. So we do have a tsunami incursion map, if you will. We have practice with our citizens. I want you all to know if you're in that zone. My mom and dad are in that zone, and they know it. And so they're prepared as best as they can. And as the police department, if we ask you to evacuate, it'd be great if you did. Right? It would be great. Now, I can't force you to do that. We're not going to go to your home and knock on your door and drag you out, but we're going to ask you as nice as we can, please get out. And if you choose not to, we're still going to try and come get you, but it's going to be a while. And so what we tell our officers, the ones out in the field, if the big one hits, most of you have probably flown on a plane, and so you know when the flight attendant says if in a disaster the oxygen falls from the ceiling and put it on yourself first, the same goes for you guys and the same goes for us. So if you've chosen not to evacuate, or if you didn't get an opportunity to, make sure your faculties are together, and then start going outward and check on your family, then check on your neighbors, check on everything. I feel like I'm a little long-winded here, but I want you to know a couple of things. How is the police department going to get a hold of you? Alert OC. We're going to use the sirens, right? We had an accidental air raid siren a week or so ago. That was exciting.
Bring it up, didn't you?
It was a test.
Yeah. We might have got a couple of calls. I don't remember. One of the amazing things about Huntington Beach, too, is we have a helicopter. And we don't just have one helicopter, we actually have 3. And we fly them on a rotational basis, but in a disaster, our pilots are coming in, they're reporting to work, even if we have to take one of those helicopters to go get them, and they're coming for you. And so we're going to use our PA system, we're going to use everything we can to try and safeguard our community, and then we're also going to go door to door. And then so I will leave you with this. Sign up, alertoc.com, please. We could really use the help, www.alertoc.com. And what that does is it's essentially a robocall for disaster management. And that'll help your law enforcement, your firefighters, and your marine safety. When the earthquake or something is coming, we can notify you, and you have an option of getting out and evacuating a little earlier than the average bear. So thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. My name is David Dominguez, and I work in community services. For those of you who don't know, community services is basically Parks and Rec, and you're thinking Parks and Rec, those people just want to have fun. What are they doing in an emergency? But actually, we do play 2 very, very key roles in the EOC. And before I go into what we actually do, I wanted to echo what the chief and the captain said about the folks in our city that take this very seriously. It's very assuring to me. Also, there's a lot of folks that work and live in the city. I lived here for almost 40 years, so that's a plus because we have an intimate knowledge of the city. We know where things are. So that does help us when we have an emergency like this, so we know where facilities are, passages, things of that nature. So what do we do? The first thing we do is we oversee the logistics section of the EOC. And there's several branches in the logistics section, and a lot of that is basically how do we get supplies? First thing happens, you have the emergency. You have the first responders that go out. Perhaps they need a special piece of equipment that the city doesn't have. How do we get that equipment? We have to feed the first responders. They're going to be out in the field for several hours, days perhaps. How do they get food? Where do they rest? We have to look at how we can get all this information. So for us, it's always a test of saying, what's out there? Where can we send people? Where can we stage? And before we do anything like that, we have to make sure that we have a safe route. Facilities are safe. The other part that we do is basically the care and shelter. If we have to evacuate. So where do we put these folks? Pets, people, everything. And before we send them to a location, we have to make sure that they've been inspected, that they're in good shape. We can't send somebody to a high school gymnasium, for example, that's been damaged. We have to make sure it's checked out prior for us sending people. When people come to these shelters, how do we make sure that we know who's there? There has to be a catalog system. How do we feed these folks? All these things have to be taken into consideration. We work very, very closely with the Red Cross on the care and shelter. So they provide staff, they provide supplies, but sometimes we need more. So we do have trained staff in our department for care and shelter that are ready to fill in whenever Red Cross doesn't have enough people or they're not there. So we have folks that can actually work with the frail and elderly. So we have people that have different needs. So that all has to be taken into account. So we do play a very, very key role in this. We have a good relationship with our school districts, so we have lists of who to contact when we need to see if we can open up a gym, things of that nature. So we do play a very, very important role, and it's not always fun and games in Parks and Rec, but I want to keep this brief because I know it's been a long night. But anyhow, after we're finished here, I'll answer any questions you may have. But thank you.
Good evening. How are y'all doing? I'm Vicki Osborne. I'm the Assistant Emergency Manager from the County Emergency Management. I work for the Sheriff's Department. I've been there for over 23 years. So your first question is, why is the county here? Well, of course, I'm from the county here to help. But in reality, I actually have a double function or a double role. My job is to plan for unincorporated residents at the county, doing exactly what Brevin and the gentleman up here do. I do that for county unincorporated residents. But in the state of California, we have another level too called the operational area. And my job is to be that broker or that coordination point. I'm the mediator between the states, so when we talk about, you heard Dr. Jones talk about FEMA has a lot of resources. Our job is to help get those resources here. It's going to take time. The one part of my job I love is I do get to work with all the different jurisdictions that we have in the county. And I have to say, you've heard your own agencies say, representatives say, Huntington Beach, we're one of the best cities around. I don't work for Huntington Beach, I don't get paid to say this. Huntington Beach has some of your best representatives working for you around. And I can say that, so. I can say that because there are things that are put in the place that we see in this city that we don't see for every city. You have a wonderful community emergency response team, CERT program, that's been around for many, many years and was put in place and started by even Brevin's predecessor. Excellent job because Huntington Beach was kind of like the founding father of CERT for the rest of Orange County and has been a model. So that's one thing that we have, and that's kind of made us grow for the whole entire county. I have a running joke with Brevin that if it's a disaster, it's going to happen in Huntington Beach. I know you don't want to hear that. No. But it's in fact the truth, that any type of hazard actually can happen in Huntington Beach. So being all hazards is so important, either being an earthquake, it being a tsunami, being an oil spill. That's never happened here, has it? No. How about a tornado? Of course not. But we have to plan for those things because those things actually happen. You guys have a beautiful coastline that you live on, but because you live on a beautiful coastline, you have hazards that some other people don't have. So I bring that all up because you're very lucky to have a wonderful, very dedicated group and team up here, especially with your emergency manager, who here knew Brevin before tonight. Raise your hand. So a few of you, a lot of you. Now after this, who's going to get to know Brevin better after tonight? And I bring that up because most of you are business and law business representatives besides being residents. Business resiliency, and you heard Dr. Jones, is so important for our economic impacts. And that business resiliency is such a big deal to get us back on track afterwards. And one of the things that I do, one of my coordination with the county I do, has to do and focus on recovery. Everyone always thinks about FEMA coming in, right? They're going to come in and they're going to take care of us for recovery, right? Who here knows how much you're going to get paid out for? Let's talk about residential. If FEMA comes in, what's the payout? Anyone know? Anyone take a stab? In the back. Not quite. If we qualify. If you're talking about a business, yes, you'll qualify for a small business association loan. But if we're talking about residents, everyone always talks about FEMA coming in and providing financial resources. The maximum amount you can get allocation is $32,000. Now, who can rebuild their house in Huntington Beach for $32,000? So it comes back to that financial impact and taking some of the philosophy that Dr. Jones brought. So it's important when we talk about recovery that we help people understand it's going to be a long process, and the community-based piece is probably one of the biggest pieces we have. The businesses are a part of that. We also have, you may have heard the term VOAD before, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. In Orange County, we're a little different. We call the COAD, Collaborative Organizations Active in Disasters. That's where we have a lot of our private nonprofit groups, our churches, they're part of this organization because we know that we are going to rely on those community partnerships and our business partnerships to rebuild. We did use that, smaller scale. We've been lucky we haven't had a catastrophic incident happen in Orange County. We've had a lot of smaller ones. We've actually had 11 federally declared disasters in the last 12 years. Think about that, that's a lot. But we've used those collaborative organizations to help rebuild. When we don't get any assistance from the federal agency, they're the ones that are going to be removing debris and mud and our sand that we may have. So it's important that we work with those groups and we work with that. We actually do have a planned volunteer management in those pieces just for one of those reasons. I know we have some questions and we'll open up for questions in a moment, but I appreciate you all being here. The important piece we can all do, if anything, is to make sure 2 of our neighbors are prepared, make sure even our businesses are prepared. Get to know your business neighbors. Because like the captain stated, is we want to come, but it might be a while. And that even talks for county resources and state resources. That's why we do a lot of planning and we focus a lot on that response, but we can't forget about recovery too. It's so important. So with that being said, Brevin, I'll turn it back to you for facilitation of questions.